Welcome into Inside the League. I'm your host, Joshua Perry, former Ohio State and NFL linebacker. And joining me is my co-host, Michael Felder, who you can catch on Bleacher Report as an NFL draft analyst, also an analyst here on Stadium for College Football. But Felder, how's it going, man? Glad to get back with you.
Yeah, I'm glad too. Listen, you know what I'm going to do? I just got the alert. I'm going to go ahead and hit that retweet button. Anyone that's watching, hit that retweet button so folks know that the show's out there, because I love talking football with you, and I think folks they stand a lot to learn with this one. And I know we got to kick it off with a couple pieces of breaking news.
Yes, and we'll get to that first piece of breaking news. We got Bucs linebacker Devin White has requested a trade. Now the Bucs are reportedly saying that they don't want to trade him, but let's say you have a linebacker piece that you probably need in this draft already who says he doesn't want to come back. How does this impact their plans as a whole?
I think you listen here. It's twofold. One, we're going to talk about linebackers, I think, maybe tomorrow. But today we're going to talk edge guys. But the big thing for me is if a guy says he don't want to be there, whoo, that's tough. And, like, that's the reality. Like, that's if a guy's like, hey, man, trade me, please. Let me go. And he's been in, what is he? He's a Pro Bowl guy. Like, he's been a quality linebacker. So it's one of those things where I guess right now value is high. Find a way to get some more back for that value. And if it's picks, draft capital, if you will, or if it's another player like a 1-for-1 or a 2-for-1, you got to figure out what you can do, because what you can't do is have him burn up another year and then you just lose him into the ether.
That's the biggest thing right there. I think that's what makes the most sense, right? Because he's got his fifth-year option. So you can trade him right now. You can still get the value out of him. Somebody could sign him to a long-term deal. If you let him go after the season's over, you're not going to get anything in return. And I'm looking at the Bucs right now as a team, honestly, that is going to be a few years away from being competitive anyway. They got an issue at quarterback. I think they need to work on their offensive skill. They've got holes on defense, so you might as well go all in on rebuild mode. Go ahead and get you some draft capital so you can get this thing back pumping. But I wanted to get to the other piece of breaking news, and that is Cliff Kingsbury reportedly going to be working at USC under Lincoln Riley with the quarterback position. He's got returning Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams over there. We know what Lincoln Riley does with the quarterback position and with that offense out there everywhere he's been. So how do you see this move?
I think this is kind of a match made in heaven, right? The thing that here's what Cliff Kingsbury is bad at. Everything that's not the quarterback. Okay, like the defense, the offensive line, the running game, wide receiver development. Like when Patrick Mahomes got drafted, he was the only Texas Tech Red Raider to get picked. And that's because Cliff developed him. So he's going to help Caleb Williams come along. Obviously, even Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray was Rookie of the Year. And he was also a two-time Pro Bowler. So what what Cliff Kingsbury does really well is quarterback. That's it. He's a quarterback-centric coach. And Lincoln Riley can have the other pieces orbiting and figure all the rest of that stuff out. So this kind of, in my mind at least, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it takes worrying about the quarterback off of Lincoln Riley's plate and lets him worry about kind of the rest of that team.
That's where I wanted to go with this, because to me, I'm saying that Lincoln Riley's got everything figured out offensively. Like, there's no question about what they can do on that side of the football. But you bring in a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, who has head coaching experience, like you said, knows the quarterback position. It allows you to kind of freelance now, and you can be a floating head coach. You can go over there with Alex Grinch on the other side of the football and start thinking about how you're going to get that defense better. And I think that's what USC needs to do to take the next step. It was always a question when Lincoln Riley was there at Oklahoma, is how do you get that defense better? So I see this as a positive to both sides. For Cliff Kingsbury also, you know, you get to collect your buyout while you're on the field. You're learning with a great offensive mind. You're kind of getting the stink off of your name a little bit. He just got to sit back and not mess anything up, and he's going to have his opportunities out ahead of him. But we got to get to the team that let Kingsbury go, and that is the Arizona Cardinals. Now, they're sitting right there with the number 3 overall pick, and they have been fielding calls from people. That is a desirable pick right now. Obviously, if you're a quarterback-needy team, the Colts, for example, that want to make sure that they can get their guy without somebody else trading into that 3 spot, might be interested in that pick. Apparently 6 teams have inquired about it. So if you are the Cardinals, are you thinking about trading out of that pick?
I am. Unless I'm trading to get to 4, I'm not trading. I'm not doing it. I will not. I like Kyler Murray. We love him. He's good. This guy, again, we mentioned 2-time Pro Bowler. Like, we got a quarterback. We got to figure out what we're going to do on the other side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we got to figure out what we're going to do with weapons. But the reality for me, if it's not you flip-flopping with the Colts or some sort of a three-way where you still end up in that spot where, like, if the only way this would make sense for me for them to go below 4 is if there's a team that wants Will Levis at 4 and they go to 5.
Right.
That's it. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Because for them, they have the opportunity to get the number 1 player in the draft. They can get the number 1 player in the draft in the number 3 slot. That is a huge deal. That's a massive win for them. And you and I have talked about this before. We talked about it on this show before. But one of the things, everybody thinks about offensive line, they think about wide receivers. But you know what else really helps a quarterback out? A defense.
Yeah.
Having a defense that makes plays. And so I know we're going to get to a little bit more of it, but like for me, when I look at this, if you're in position, this is why I question what the Bears did in terms of switching with the Panthers, but the Bears got some big capital, like proven capital in respect to what they got. But man, if you're going to take yourself out of the running for Will Anderson, I think you're doing yourself a disservice.
That's the thing for me. I think we see this very similarly. I think that if you do anything but flip with the Colts, you're putting yourself at big risk to lose Will Anderson. And it depends on what their people have him ranked as and where he compares to other players on the board. I think you and I see it very similarly. If that guy is within range, I think that you want him as a part of your squad. I'm not going to let him go. I tend to agree with you that you could get potentially first, best player in the draft. Great value getting him at 3. I'm definitely there. So I see that this flip with the Colts would probably be the most probable sense. But again, we don't know what their board looks like and how much they value different guys and if they're willing to maybe miss out on a Will Anderson and just slot in another player right there. But as you start to look at this team holistically, where are some of the holes that they need to fill? We talked about defense, but what else do you see?
I mean, sticking on defense, I mean, obviously cornerback too, right? But nobody's going to pick a cornerback at 3. So maybe you do lose Will Anderson and you slide back a little bit. And then you are able to get, whether it's Devin Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez, Keely Ringo, any of these other guys, maybe you slide back and get one of those guys. But at the end of the day, man, if you got a chance to get Will Anderson, he's going to make you happy, man. And unless you're buying yourself back into the back half of the first round,
right?
If you can slide down and then also buy back into the back half of the first round and get both a rusher, which we're going to talk about, I know, and get a corner. If you can't do that, I don't think this makes sense for them.
Yeah, I think the other one that could make sense if they decide that they want to trade down potentially is knowing maybe D-Hop is not going to be a trade candidate. You could release him, clear up some cap space doing that. You bring in an offensive weapon. Certainly could see that helping your quarterback out. Now, do you think the Cardinals would have any type of interest in trading for Devin White?
I mean, they could use him for sure. I wonder what that trade looks like, though. I wonder what you have to give up to get him. And that's the question. Like, I'll throw that question back to you. What do you have to give up to get Devin White?
I'm not exactly sure at this point, but I mean, he's a guy that when you sign him, you're going to have to probably extend him knowing that free agency is coming up. So you have to have it in your mind already that you're going to be committing big money to this guy, $20 million a year potentially. And I'm not exactly sure what the trade capital would look like to get him in the building in the first place, but this is typically what you see. And I know that the Cardinals had a little bit of a rough situation at the quarterback position, but when you're drafting there in the top 3, you've got many holes that you need to fill. So there will be a lot of candidates. Be very curious to see where they go, but I think both of us agree that Will Anderson should be the guy there. And after this break, we're going to get to your best edge rushers in this class. Will Anderson is going to be one of those guys. So we'll have that conversation when Inside the League returns. This is Inside the League, and we've got our top 5 edge rushers. This is Felder's list right here. We talked about Will Anderson in the first block. You got Myles Murphy out of Clemson. Tyree Wilson is a guy who is a big name as of now, but a lot of people probably haven't seen his tape. Nolan Smith out of Georgia, and Lucas Van Ness rounding out the top 5. And Felder, I was just curious, just to start, as you started to build this top 5, what was the differentiator in how you slotted each of these guys in there?
Whoever is almost as good as Will Anderson. like he's clearly, to me, it's that we talked about it at the top of the show, but he clearly, to me, is the #1 player in this draft, Will Anderson. My favorite play from Will Anderson, and I think you'll appreciate this, and I hope the viewers will appreciate this. My favorite play for him is against Texas A&M. They pull a guard and they pull a tight end, and he stones the guard, stones the tight end, and then the right side tackle comes to help out, and he just forces all those guys back down inside, creates a problem where the 2 linebackers come in, get a tackle for loss. He doesn't get a stat on that play, but guess what? That's a heck of a play, and that's my favorite play he made all season. This guy's an absolute monster. When we get to Myles Murphy, let me ask you, how much are you hearing about Myles Murphy? Because it seems like he's a consensus top 10, top 15 player, but nobody is talking about it.
Yeah, it is unique from that sense. Like, he's one of those guys to me that I really love because you play him outside, you can kick him inside. He's got that mass to him. He's an extremely powerful player, and he's big. So I like those types of ends. And I know we get to some of the edge rushers, and we'll talk about one, Nolan Smith, who's a little bit of a smaller guy. And I feel like those guys are one-trick ponies in the sense that they can get after the quarterback as well as anybody that's playing the game. But when it comes to first and second down, run stopping, can you set a firm edge? Can you do, like you said, what Will Anderson did, where you're coming around, you got pullers coming at you. Can you stone a guy, get your hands back, reset, tie those guys up, let your linebackers make a play? And I think that's where Murphy really shines, is of course you're going to see the stats and you're going to see some of the big plays in the backfield. But when it comes to being a complete edge, a guy that you feel confident in having out there for 3 downs, his game really stands out to me.
Yeah, he's someone that doesn't have to come off the field. Another guy I don't think ever has to come off the field is Tyree Wilson. He's a guy we have at 3 here. And you look at Tyree Wilson, and I love this guy. I mean, he must have rocks for hands. Like the way that he puts paws on people and is able to move. Go ahead. Come on, tell me.
It was the thing that I wrote down. The first thing I wrote down about him was heavy hands. He has very heavy hands. He puts them on those guys up front, and you can see them shake. You can see the jolt. Right, and that's how you know that a guy's got very strong, powerful hands. You see him rip on a disengage, and he's ragdolling big guys around. I think that's a big difference maker. When it comes to his hands, I'd like to see them become more active on his pass rush. I think a lot of times he'll just be comfortable throwing a long arm in there or just kind of dipping the shoulder. I want to see those violent, heavy hands in the pass rush moves because I think he can instantly become more productive doing that.
Yeah, I think it's an issue for him. It's an issue of learning more moves, adding to his repertoire, if you will. Like the idea, like he will put the paws on you like this. He will dip underneath for sure. But I want to, and as you mentioned, that long arm is powerful. Especially if he gets you right underneath here and he cuts off that air supply. Buddy, you ain't blocking if you can't breathe. So he can do all those things. I'm going to kick it to Nolan Smith. And this is the question I have for you. You're a guy that played linebacker. Is Nolan Smith an edge rusher? Or is he an off-the-ball linebacker because he can do both very well?
This one is really difficult. Selfishly, I'd like to see him play off the ball. He's fast. He's a guy who's got really good instincts. He understands how to play in space, too, which is very hard. And for people who kind of watch the game of football, I played off-the-ball linebacker. I've also played on the edge in my career. It's 2 completely different jobs. You see the game totally differently. Things time out very differently from those spots. But he understands what it's like to be in space, and he understands the timing and play development from off the ball. I'd like to see it. But when you watch him on the edge, that quick step that he has and that ability to dip and bend and to get to the quarterback, they don't make guys who can bend like that. And I think that's what's going to be attractive to a lot of organizations is he has the things that we cannot teach, and we want him getting after the quarterback.
Yeah, the bend is the key to me. Like this, his hip flexibility is amazing. I know he's coming off of an injury. We have to deal with that. But I'm going to say this: one of my brightest spots for Georgia this year was watching the way that Nolan Smith supported his team. They're going for back-to-back championships. He's not, in theory, he's not a part of it like on the field. But the way that he stood up for his guys, and he didn't shrink away, he didn't disappear, he didn't go and just start training for the draft. He was there every day at every practice. He was there for every single game. He was there rooting for his teammates. Every time they called the timeout, every time TV timeout, other team called a timeout, his team called a timeout, he's in the middle of that huddle telling guys what to do. To me, Nolan Smith is someone that for the next decade is going to be the face of your franchise.
And I'll take that one step forward, too. I think a lot of times when guys get injured, knowing that they're going to head into the NFL draft, they withdraw from school, they go and train, they try to get healthy. Yep. One of the things that they don't do is they don't spend enough time in the classroom learning about football. And he was a guy that benefited not only from being around the team and displaying those leadership skills, but I bet you he was better on the board because he actually spent time in the film room with his team learning about football, and I think that's extremely important. Now, Lucas Van Ness is a guy that we had talked about previously on this show. I made the comment that if he, for some reason, falls in the draft to the Saints at 29, you should snap him up. You said there's no shot that that happens for Van Ness. What do you see out of his game that makes you so certain that he's going to be gone before then?
Well, listen, this guy ran faster than Will Anderson. Will Anderson, #1 on the board. And he's coming from a program, and you know this better than I do. You played in the Big Ten. These guys are taught very well. Iowa defenders are taught very well. Now, usually the knock is they're not that fast. But guess what? If you're faster than Will Anderson, you're probably fast. So you got an opportunity to be a well-taught guy that's got the wheels to do it. Went back and watched a lot of him, and he does. We talked about it with Tyree Wilson, right, having moves. Van Ness has moves. He's got moves. He's got setups. He's got counters. He's got all these things. And then you throw in the actualized speed. And now we've got a guy that you can trust to go out there and go make plays. He can set you up for a swim. He can set you up for a rip. He's going to do all those little things. And that's what I really love about him. And I guess, you know what? A guy I know you love, Laporta, right? The tight end. Like, realistically, like, practicing against him over time, like, especially in the spring when it's just you on you, like, I'm sure that probably helped him out a lot.
No, it certainly did. And you talked about Van Ness and his ability to set up moves and how to counter. And as I watched the tape, I think that can be summed up in just a natural feel for the game. Like, I think that the best pass rushers have a plan, and they have a developed pass rush tree, and they understand how different moves complement themselves. But you can't go in there dictating what you're going to do. You have to do it based off of what the offense is giving you and where you feel you can fit into the game plan. I think he has that feel. It was one of the first notes I wrote about him. The other thing I love, he's a big second effort guy, which means that he's going to get some of those cleanup sacks that other guys might not get. And then finally, he's blocked kicks. In the punt game, he's a guy who got his hand on the football. And to me, that shows a guy who's a high-effort guy. He's willing to play on teams, and he wants to sell out to make the play, right? And if I'm drafting somebody, I want to know they have that level of commitment to the team, because it's not a lot of times that you see a defensive end, an edge rusher that's going to be on the special teams units going after punts. They reserve that for some of the skinnier guys. They get the speed out there. He's fast enough, he's long enough, and he desires enough to do those things.
Yeah, I think his desire is that. I mean, you can't put a price tag or you can't put a quantifying number on that. But the reality of it is this is a guy that he wants to be on the field, and he wants to be on the field every play. And that's something that, like, we listen. We both know there's guys that are like, I mean, just put me in on third down, put me in your spinner package, put me in that rush package. And then he's like, no, don't take me off the field. Don't take me off the field. I mean, I remember a year ago, right at the same time, we were talking about big Jordan Davis. And Jordan Davis had to prove that he wanted to be on the field. Lucas Van Ness don't got to prove that he wants to be on the field. I know they're different positions, but he doesn't have to prove it. He wants to be out there. He wants to be on the field. This guy's a dog with the bone, and listen, if you get in between him and that bone, you're going to be in trouble.
You flip the tape on, and you can absolutely see that. Now, I wanted to go through some of these teams who may be in need of a pass rusher, and you brought up a really interesting thought process to where throughout the season, we're looking at the Eagles, we're looking at the Chiefs. These are two teams that did a really good job offensively. There were a lot of opponents that were playing from behind. we thought that the sack numbers indicated that they were fine at the edge position. But when you get to the Super Bowl, you don't see that same production. Now it makes you ask the question, do they need edge rushers? What are your thoughts?
I think so, absolutely. I think the Chiefs and the Eagles got to be in the buyer's market when it comes to edge rushers, because when it was good on good, they were not very good at getting to the quarterback. So I think that worked. And then you get to the Cardinals, the Bears, Atlanta. They were just bad at it. They were bad at it all year. And so obviously they're buyers in the market as well. But for me, I do think we have to look at the fact that the Chiefs and the Eagles were winning games. They were out in front. And so they also need to be in the same marketplace. And they have the luxury of not having to worry about getting a quarterback. So when you have that luxury, now you can, whether it's moving some pieces around, maybe they become buyers, as we talked about in that trade marketplace, but maybe they become buyers in the marketplace to get an edge rusher, because it's going to be really important for them to get to the quarterback. That game was, I mean, I watched it. I know you watched it. Mm-hmm. They couldn't get to the quarterback.
And I think it's as important as having the all-star quarterback is to have the pass rusher that can get that guy on the ground. That's why these guys are in high demand. I'm excited to see what happens with these guys that we just went over. But on the other side of this break, we're going to get you our sneaky good player, one guy that not many analysts are talking about, but we love, and you'll want to see that. This is Inside the League. This is Inside the League, and now it's time for our sneaky good player. Felder, who are you rolling with?
Oh, I'm going with Robert Beal. Robert Beal also played at Georgia, got called, got his role moved up a little bit with the injury to Nolan Smith. But this dude can absolutely play. He had a couple tackles. He had 3 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. But he's got those, like, he's still got those hands of stone, too, like Roberto Duran. This guy, when he puts the paws on you, you're in trouble. Big-time recruit coming out of high school. Didn't have maybe the career he wanted at Georgia, but certainly he's capable. He, to me, is someone that's going to make a roster and be early day 3 pick, probably, and just keep going. Who do you got?
I've got O'Shawn Mathis, started his career at TCU, finished up at Nebraska. This is a big guy. He's long. He's about 6'5". He's got 35-inch arms, and he's quicker than he is fast, but somebody who really popped off the tape for me. Just his ability to finish plays. I think he's going to have to develop more in the run game, maybe add some more mass, get some more desire to really mix it up with those big guys up front when it comes to that, but he was pretty daggone good. But Felder, I thought this show was pretty daggone good too, and we'll see you tomorrow right here on Inside the League.